Amina had always been the kind of student who slipped quietly into a room and slipped out again, without anyone noticing. She arrived early to every class, sat in the same seat, kept her books neatly ranged, and listened with full attention. Her teachers often said she was polite and hardworking, but they never seemed to expect much more from her than good attendance and steady progress. They saw her as a careful student, not a brilliant one, and Amina never did anything to change that view. She preferred it that way. She wasn't the type who liked attention. When other students volunteered to perform in front of the class, or show off a new piece they learned, she stayed silent. She kept her hands folded in her lap, listened to the others play, applauded quietly, and avoided eye contact when the teacher looked around for volunteers. No one knew that her silence wasn't from lack of skill, but from something deeper: a quiet nature, a soft heart, and a lifetime of keeping her gifts hidden. At home, though, she was different. There, she allowed herself to breathe, to feel, and most importantly, to play. In her small apartment, the old upright piano stood against the wall like a loyal friend who had waited for her since childhood. Its keys were worn and its sound wasn't perfect, but to her, it was more precious than anything else she owned. When she sat in front of it at night, after finishing her school assignments and daily chores, she let the world fall away. Each evening, she lifted the fallboard slowly, touching the keys with a softness that came from years of practice. She always played late, when the city outside had grown quiet and the lights from neighboring buildings flickered gently through her curtains. That time of night felt like hers alone, a peaceful moment she cherished deeply. Her teachers at the academy taught her beginner and intermediate pieces, usually gentle classical works or simple exercises to strengthen her fingers. She followed those lessons carefully in class, but at home, she explored music far beyond what anyone expected from her. She played complicated compositions she had learned over years of private practice pieces, filled with fast jumps, difficult trills, and emotional depth. She spent hours trying to understand the heart behind each melody, and the intentions behind each note. Sometimes she would lose track of time completely. She would play and replay the same passage until it sounded exactly the way she imagined. She wasn't chasing perfection for praise. She simply loved the music. It made her feel alive in a way nothing else did. Her parents had always known she loved the piano. When she was younger, they had saved money piece by piece to buy her that old upright instrument from a distant relative. They knew it wasn't fancy, but they also knew it would give her a chance to grow. Amina never forgot that sacrifice, and she promised herself she would honor it through her dedication. Still, she kept her true ability hidden, unsure how the world would react if she showed too much of herself. At the academy, the other students chatted freely in the hallways, laughed during breaks, and made plans to practice together. Amina smiled politely but rarely joined in. She liked observing people from a distance, noticing small things others overlooked. She had a kind nature that made her gentle with everyone, but she didn't always know how to express that in words. Her teachers often assumed she was shy because she lacked confidence in her playing. In truth, she simply didn't feel the need to prove anything. She didn't want envy or attention or competition. She wanted to live quietly and love the piano without pressure. But even quiet people cannot hide everything. Every now and then, when she practiced lightly during class, her fingers moved with an ease that made nearby students pause for a second. It wasn't enough to reveal her full talent, but it was enough to spark small moments of curiosity. A teacher might raise an eyebrow, wondering if they had underestimated her. Another student might glance in her direction, noticing a fluidity in her hands they hadn't seen before. Still, no one truly understood who she was behind her calm expression. One evening, after a long day at the academy, Amina walked home through the narrow streets of her neighborhood. The air was cool, and the distant sound of people chatting and children playing made her feel warm inside. She carried her books pressed against her chest, deep in thought. She wondered about the upcoming student showcase that the academy had announced earlier that morning. It was supposed to be a friendly event where students performed in front of teachers, families, and guests. Most students were excited, seeing it as a chance to show their skills. Amina didn't plan to participate. She already knew she would avoid the spotlight, just as she always had. When she reached her apartment, she unlocked the door quietly and stepped inside. Dinner was simple, and after cleaning up, she went straight to her piano. She sat down, placed her fingers gently on the keys, and closed her eyes. Tonight, she chose to play a piece that always challenged her, something filled with fast leaps and delicate touches. Her fingers danced across the keys effortlessly, filling the room with a brightness that chased away any fatigue she felt. She didn't realize anyone could hear her, but her neighbor upstairs paused for a moment, recognizing the beauty of the melody. As the music flowed, Amina lost herself completely. She imagined herself in an empty concert hall, the lights dimmed, the piano gleaming under a soft spotlight. She imagined playing for no one but herself, letting each note rise and fall like a living thing. When she finally stopped, her hands rested gently on her lap. She breathed out slowly, feeling calm and whole. The next day at the academy, something unexpected happened. Her main instructor approached her after class with a kind smile. He complimented her progress and suggested she consider performing in the showcase. She was surprised. She usually avoided attention so easily that teachers didn't bother asking her. But today was different. The instructor explained that he believed she needed more confidence and that performing would help her grow. He even encouraged her to try a challenging piece, something that would push her out of her comfort zone. Amina listened quietly, nodding respectfully. She didn't reveal that she had already played much harder pieces in the quiet of her home. The idea of performing in front of a crowd felt overwhelming, yet something inside her stirred a small feeling she wasn't used to, something like possibility. After class, she walked down the hallway slowly, thinking about what her teacher had said. She didn't feel pressure, only curiosity. Why had he approached her today? Did he see something in her that she had tried so hard to keep hidden? She imagined standing on stage, the lights bright, the audience waiting in silence. She imagined touching the keys in front of all those eyes. It made her heart race, but not entirely from fear. When she reached home that evening, she sat at her piano with a different kind of energy. She lifted the fallboard, took a deep breath, and began to play. She wasn't practicing for the showcase yet, but she was exploring a new feeling, one she had avoided for years. The feeling of being seen. As the melodies filled the room, she realized something important. Maybe it was time to share the part of herself she had kept hidden for so long. Maybe she didn't have to shine loudly. Maybe she only had to shine honestly. The night went on, and she continued playing, unaware that the decision she would soon make, whether to perform or not, would change not only how others saw her, but how she saw herself. And for the first time in a long while, she felt ready to take a small step forward, even if it scared her, because deep down, she knew she had something worth sharing, even if the world hadn't discovered it yet. Amina woke up the next morning with a strange feeling in her chest. It wasn't fear, and it wasn't excitement either. It was something in between, something that made her pause for a moment before getting out of bed. She sat quietly, thinking about what her teacher had said the day before. His words kept repeating in her mind, not in a demanding way, but in a gentle one, as if they were waiting for her to listen more closely. She got ready for the day, tied her hair neatly, and headed to the academy. The streets were lively as always, children rushing to school, shopkeepers opening their stores, and neighbors exchanging morning greetings. Amina walked with her usual calm steps, carrying her books close to her chest. Even as she moved through the noise of the morning, she felt her thoughts drifting toward the showcase again. When she entered the academy, she noticed the energy in the building had changed. Students were talking excitedly in the hallways, sharing ideas about what they planned to perform. Some were proud and loud, already confident about their pieces. Others were nervous but still eager to participate. Amina moved through them quietly, as she always did, her presence soft and unnoticed. Her first class of the day went by as usual. She listened carefully, took notes, and followed every instruction. But something inside her felt different. Whenever her hands touched the piano keys during practice, she felt a spark of courage she wasn't used to feeling. It was small, but it was there. During a short break, she sat alone on a bench in the hallway, watching other students practice nearby. One student played a lively piece, missing notes here and there, but continuing with determination. Another was trying to perfect a slow, emotional melody. The atmosphere was full of effort, hope, and dreams. Amina wondered not for the first time what would happen if she joined them, not as the quiet girl in the back, but as someone who stepped forward. After lunch, her instructor approached her again. He wasn't pushy. He simply asked if she had thought about what they had discussed. Amina nodded slowly. She told him she wasn't sure yet, but she was considering it. The instructor smiled warmly, encouraged her to take her time, and reminded her that the academy believed in all students, including her. She thanked him politely and went about the rest of her day, but his words stayed in her mind. Someone believed she could do it. Someone wanted to see her take a chance. When classes ended, she didn't go straight home. Instead, she walked to one of the empty practice rooms at the academy. She rarely used these rooms because she preferred the comfort of her own piano at home. But today felt different. She wanted to try something new. She closed the door behind her, placed her bag on the chair, and sat at the grand piano in the center of the room. It was much larger than the piano she had at home, with keys that felt smoother and a sound that echoed beautifully in the quiet space. For a moment, she just sat there, letting her fingers rest gently on the keys. She didn't think about who she was supposed to be or how she was seen by others. Instead, she allowed herself to think about the music she loved. She began to play a piece she hadn't touched in months, a fast, bright composition that always filled her with energy. The notes echoed warmly through the room, rising and falling with precision. She felt lighter with each measure, as if the music was guiding her forward. Unbeknownst to her, a student walking past the practice room slowed down when he heard the sound. He stood quietly outside the door, listening with wide eyes. He had never heard Amina play like that. Most people hadn't. He stayed only a moment before walking away in surprise, unsure if he should tell someone what he had heard. Amina finished the piece with a soft exhale. She didn't know anyone had listened. She didn't know anyone had been surprised. She only knew that she felt strong in that moment, stronger than she had expected. When she walked home that evening, the sky was turning orange. The setting sun cast long shadows on the streets, and Amina walked slowly, thinking about everything that had happened during the day. She felt a warmth growing inside her, as if her heart was telling her something she had ignored for too long. When she finally reached her apartment, she placed her bag on the table and sat at her piano. She touched the keys lightly, unsure of what she wanted to play. Instead of choosing a difficult piece, she began playing something soft and gentle, something that made her feel grounded. While she played, she thought about the showcase. She imagined herself walking onto the stage, sitting in front of the piano, and playing with her whole heart. She imagined the silence in the room, the breathless attention, the way each note would float into the air. Part of her still felt scared. The thought of performing in front of a crowd made her stomach twist. But another part of her, the quiet, brave part, felt ready. Later that night, she sat at her desk and opened her notebook. She wrote down 3 words. Maybe I can. She stared at them for a long time. She didn't cross them out. The next day at the academy, she walked into the building feeling a little different. She wasn't suddenly bold or outgoing, but something inside her had shifted slightly. Her steps were firmer. Her gaze lifted more often. During a short break between classes, she approached her instructor. He looked up from his papers, surprised to see her standing in front of him with such calm determination. She took a slow breath and told him she had made her decision. She would perform. The instructor smiled with genuine joy. He asked her what piece she wanted to play. For a moment, she hesitated. She didn't want to choose something too simple, and she certainly didn't want to show the world everything at once. But she wanted to play something meaningful, something that reflected her love for music. She mentioned a piece known for its difficulty and beauty. The instructor nodded, impressed by her choice but also aware of the challenge it posed. He didn't question her decision. Instead, he encouraged her and offered to help her prepare. That afternoon, Amina rehearsed with a new sense of purpose. Her teacher watched her closely, noticing things he had never seen before: her control over dynamics, her confidence in tricky passages, her emotional connection to the melody. Each time she played through the piece, he grew more surprised. This wasn't the Amina he thought he knew. This was someone else, someone much more skilled, much more expressive, much more powerful. By the end of the lesson, he realized something important. He and the rest of the staff had underestimated her, not because she lacked talent, but because she never showed it openly. Amina walked home with a soft smile on her face. She felt proud, not because she had impressed her teacher, but because she had taken a step forward without letting fear stop her. That night, she practiced again, not out of worry, but out of love for the music. She played until the room felt warm and the world outside felt distant. As she finished for the evening, she looked at her piano with gratitude. It had been her friend through every moment, every joy, every doubt, every quiet night. And now it would guide her into something new. She went to bed with a peaceful heart, knowing that the decision she had made would change her journey forever. She didn't know what the showcase would bring, but for the first time, she was ready to face it. Whatever happened next, she would walk into it with courage, and that alone made her feel stronger than ever before. The days leading up to the showcase passed quietly. But inside Amina's heart, something was slowly building. It wasn't fear anymore. It wasn't doubt. It was a warm, steady strength she had never allowed herself to feel before. She still moved through the academy the same way, calm, gentle, unnoticed, but there was a different shine in her eyes whenever she touched the piano keys. Her classmates continued practicing around her. Some whispered about who might perform the most impressive piece. Others nervously repeated the same passages over and over, worried about making mistakes in front of the teachers and guests. But Amina stayed focused on her own world. She wasn't trying to outshine anyone. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She simply wanted to share the music she carried in her heart. Every day after classes, she practiced in the same quiet room with the old piano. She would slip inside with her bag, close the door gently behind her, and sit down in front of the instrument as if greeting an old friend. The room became her private place to grow, filled with nothing but music and her steady breathing. At first, she practiced slowly, paying attention to every detail. She worked through the hard passages with patience, sometimes repeating a single line 10 times until it felt right. When she made mistakes, she didn't panic. She simply paused, smiled to herself, and tried again. She had learned long ago that music was not about chasing perfection. It was about becoming one with the melody, unknown to her. More and more students began noticing the sounds coming from that practice room. People walked by, heard the rapid notes, and stopped for a moment in surprise. Some whispered to their friends, wondering who was inside. Most never imagined it could be Amina, the quiet girl who rarely spoke. One afternoon, as she played the fast section of her chosen piece, her instructor quietly opened the door. He didn't want to interrupt her. He only wanted to observe her progress. But the moment he heard her fingers moving across the keys, his expression softened into pure astonishment. He had known she was talented, but this level of control, emotion, and skill was far beyond what he expected. He stood by the door for nearly a minute, listening. She never noticed him. She was fully inside the music, her body moving gently with the rhythm, her expression focused but peaceful. When she finished the section and lifted her hands with a soft exhale, the instructor stepped forward. "You've been working very hard," he said kindly. Amina looked up in surprise, realizing she hadn't been alone. A faint blush spread across her cheeks, but she smiled and nodded. She didn't know what to say, so she simply waited. He told her how impressed he was, how her progress was remarkable, and how her dedication showed in every note she played. Amina didn't know what to do with that kind of praise. It felt warm but unfamiliar, like sunlight she wasn't used to standing in. The instructor encouraged her to keep practicing exactly as she was. He told her the showcase would be a wonderful chance not just for others to hear her, but for her to step into her own strength. His words weren't loud or dramatic. They were gentle and honest, which made them even more meaningful. After he left, Amina sat silently for a moment. She placed her hand on the piano, feeling its cool surface. For the first time in her life, she felt seen, truly seen. The rest of the week brought more small but meaningful moments. A few students who usually didn't speak to her began offering polite smiles or simple greetings. One of them even asked if she would play something for them someday. Amina felt shy, but she appreciated their kindness. Despite these small interactions, she continued keeping to herself, not out of fear, but because she wanted to stay grounded. She didn't want to lose the quiet rhythm she had built. She needed that calm to prepare for the showcase. When the day before the event arrived, the academy buzzed with tension. Some students rushed through last-minute rehearsals. Others sat in corners of the hallway, going through their sheet music nervously. The teachers walked around offering advice and encouragement. Amina spent her final practice in the same quiet room. She played the entire piece from start to finish, letting every note speak for itself. When she completed the last section, she closed her eyes and sat still. She didn't feel fear or excitement. She felt ready. That evening at home, she set her bag down, washed up, and went straight to her piano. She didn't play her showcase piece. Instead, she played something soft and gentle, something that reminded her of why she loved music in the first place. She wanted to end the night with peace, not pressure. Afterward, she sat by her window, looking out at the quiet street below. She remembered the girl she used to be, the one who always hid behind silence, afraid to be noticed. And she realized she wasn't that girl anymore. She was still quiet, still gentle, but she was stronger now. She had found her own voice, not in words, but in music. Sleep came easily that night. The next morning, the academy looked different. The hallways were decorated with simple banners, Chairs were set up neatly in the main hall. Families and guests slowly filled the building, talking softly among themselves. The air felt heavy with expectation. Backstage, the students gathered in small groups, fixing their clothes, warming up their fingers, and breathing deeply. Amina stood slightly off to the side, holding her sheet music even though she had memorized every note weeks ago. Her instructor approached her once more. He asked how she felt. She took a moment to think before answering softly, calm. And it was true. She didn't feel faint or shaky. She didn't feel overwhelmed. She felt steady. The instructor smiled and told her that her calmness was a strength. He reminded her that she didn't have to prove anything. She only had to share her music. One by one, the students were called to the stage. Amina listened carefully to each performance. Some were strong and confident. Others were hesitant but heartfelt. Every student brought their own story to the music, and she respected each one. Finally, her name was called. The room seemed to fall quiet, even backstage. Amina took a slow breath and stepped forward. She walked toward the stage with small, steady steps, feeling the soft vibration of her heartbeat beneath her ribs. When she reached the center of the stage, she didn't rush. She sat down, adjusted the bench, and placed her hands gently on the keys. The hall was filled with eyes watching her, waiting to see what the usually quiet girl would do. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the silence settle around her. Then she began to play. The first notes were soft but clear, floating through the hall with unexpected grace. People in the audience leaned forward. Some teachers looked at one another, surprised by the depth of her touch. As the piece grew faster, her hands moved with unbelievable ease. Every difficult jump, every rapid run, every delicate trill flowed out of her as if the piano itself was guiding her. Her expression remained calm, her posture relaxed, her heart fully open. The hall fell into complete silence except for the music. No one whispered. No one shifted. Everyone watched her in awe. Halfway through the performance, her instructor felt a sudden swell of pride. He realized that hidden beneath her quiet nature was a level of talent they had never recognized. She wasn't just good. She was exceptional. When she reached the final section of the piece, her fingers moved like light across the keys. The notes rose higher, brighter, more powerful, until the last chord filled the hall like a soft burst of color. And then silence, the deep, breathless silence. Amina lifted her hands slowly and placed them on her lap. She didn't look up right away. She just breathed. Then the hall erupted into applause. It wasn't polite applause. It was warm, loud, amazed applause. People clapped with wide eyes and open hearts. Some stood. Some looked stunned. Her instructor felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes, overwhelmed by the beauty of what he had just witnessed. Amina finally looked up and saw the faces in front of her smiling, shocked, grateful. For the first time in her life, she felt truly understood. She stood, bowed softly, and walked off stage. Behind the curtain, she exhaled deeply. Her hands trembled, but not from fear, from relief, from joy, from knowing she had shared a piece of her soul with the world. She had stepped into the light without losing herself, and the world had listened. The next morning arrived with a strange quietness inside the mansion, as if the walls themselves were still holding their breath from what had happened the night before. The housemaid woke up early, the way she always did, but today her steps felt lighter, almost nervous. She kept thinking about the way everyone had stared at her after she played, and how the entire room had fallen still, like someone had pressed pause on time. She tried to shake off those memories as she put on her uniform and tied her hair back. She kept reminding herself that she was just a worker in that huge house. People in the mansion were from another world, a world full of power, money, and expectations. She was simply part of the staff, someone who stayed mostly unseen. But even as she tried to settle back into her routine, her heart kept replaying the sound of the piano. It was the one place where she didn't feel small. She didn't know how to explain it. But when her fingers touched those keys, something inside her always woke up, like a part of her she had been forced to hide for too long. As she stepped into the hallway with a small cleaning cloth in her hand, she felt someone approaching. It was the mansion's caretaker, an older woman who always kept to herself and rarely showed emotion. She stopped next to her and looked at her with a curious expression. "They're talking about you," the caretaker said quietly. The housemaid blinked. "Who? Everyone," the caretaker replied. "Since early morning. They say the owner couldn't stop replaying the moment you played that single note. They say he's been sitting in the music room for hours." Hearing that made the housemaid's stomach twist. She didn't want attention. She had lived most of her life trying to avoid it. "I didn't mean to upset anyone," she whispered. The caretaker gave a small sigh. "You didn't upset them. You surprised them. People like them don't enjoy being surprised." Before she could ask more, the caretaker walked away, her footsteps fading down the long hallway. The housemaid took a slow breath and tried to focus on her tasks, but she kept glancing toward the direction of the music room. Part of her wanted to hide. Another part of her wanted to understand why such a small moment created so much noise in a place where everything usually stayed perfectly controlled. By midday, one of the mansion's assistants came to find her. He looked uncomfortable, as if he wasn't sure how to speak to her. "The owner wants to see you," he said. She felt her heart skip. "Right now," he nodded. "In the music room." Then he hurried off as if he didn't want to be part of whatever was about to unfold. She wiped her hands nervously on her apron and walked toward the room. The closer she got, the louder her heartbeat became. She pushed open the door gently. The owner was sitting by the grand piano, leaning slightly forward, staring at the keys as if they were speaking to him. Sunlight poured through the tall windows behind him, making the room look brighter than usual. When he finally looked up at her, there was no anger in his face, no frustration, only deep curiosity. "Sit," he said, pointing toward the bench. She shook her head quickly. "Sir, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause a scene last night. I shouldn't have touched the piano. I know it wasn't my place." He raised a hand gently, stopping her. "You did nothing wrong. I called you here because I want you to play again." Hearing that made her throat tighten. "Sir, I'm not a musician. You played one note," he said, still watching her carefully. And the entire room changed. "That doesn't happen by accident. Sit." His voice wasn't harsh, but it carried a firmness she couldn't ignore. Her legs felt weak as she slowly walked toward the bench. She sat down carefully, her hands trembling just a little. He stayed standing nearby, waiting. "Play something," he said. She stared at the keys for a long moment, unsure if she could even produce a sound with him watching so closely. She closed her eyes, breathing in slowly, and let her fingers settle on the keys the way she used to when she was younger. Then she played. It wasn't anything grand. It wasn't a famous piece or something meant for audiences. It was a small melody from her childhood, something she used to play to calm her mother when she was sick, something she once played to fall asleep when the world around her felt too heavy. As the notes filled the room, her fears began to fade. She didn't know how to explain it, but the piano always felt like a friend that didn't ask for explanations. When she finished, the room stayed silent for a few seconds. The owner's expression had changed. He didn't look like the strict, powerful man she had always avoided. He looked almost human, almost soft. "Where did you learn that?" he asked quietly. She hesitated. "I used to play in school and at home, but life got busy, and then things changed. I didn't have a piano anymore." "But you still remember," he said. She nodded. "I never forgot. I just stopped believing it mattered." He turned away for a moment, as if thinking deeply. Then he looked back at her. "I want you to continue playing, not just once, not by accident. I want you to practice every day." Her eyes widened. "Sir, I'm just a housemaid. I have work. Your duties will be adjusted," he said calmly. "From today, playing the piano will be part of your role here." Her breath caught in her chest. She didn't know whether to feel grateful, scared, or confused. She had never expected anything like this. She had spent so much of her life feeling invisible, and now suddenly someone was insisting she step into the light. "Why?" she whispered. His answer came after a long moment. "Because talent like yours doesn't just show up, and when it does, it should not be ignored." The words struck her deeper than she expected. No one had ever told her something like that. He stepped back and gestured toward the piano again. "From today, this is yours to use, anytime you want." Then he added, almost under his breath, "Just don't waste it." Before she could reply, he walked out of the room. She sat there in silence, her fingers still resting on the keys. For a long moment, she didn't move. She didn't even breathe deeply. She just stared at the piano, realizing what this moment meant. Her life, which had been the same for so long, had suddenly shifted. She wasn't sure if she was ready for the change, but she felt something in her chest, a small spark she hadn't felt in years. Hope. She placed her hands back on the keys, and slowly, gently, she began to play again. And as the soft notes filled the quiet mansion, she had no idea that this was only the beginning of something far bigger than she ever imagined. The hall was still buzzing from the night before, and the young woman woke up with a feeling she had never felt before. It was not pride exactly, but something warm and light, as if the world had shifted slightly in her favor. She sat by her small window, looking out at the quiet street, and took a long breath. For years she had played only for herself, not expecting anyone to notice. And now, suddenly, people were looking at her differently. They were seeing what she had kept hidden for so long. She made herself a simple breakfast, but barely ate. Her mind kept returning to the moment when the whole hall had fallen silent. She kept hearing the sound of her own fingers moving on the piano. It felt unreal, yet also strangely natural. She had not forced anything. She had simply played the way she always played, honest, focused, and with her whole heart. Later that morning, she walked to the academy. The building looked the same as always, but she felt different stepping inside. Students who normally did not notice her now turned their heads. Some smiled, others stared, some whispered to their friends. It made her nervous, but she tried to stay calm. She had never liked attention, but she also knew this moment was part of her journey. One of the teachers met her in the hallway. He looked at her with a kind expression she had rarely seen before. He told her they had been talking about her performance the whole night, and that they were deeply impressed. He admitted they had not expected her to play at such a high level. She listened quietly, unsure what to say. She was not angry that they had underestimated her. She understood why they had. She had never shown them anything more. The teacher then invited her to join an advanced training group. That only a few students were selected for each year. It was a rare chance to grow under master instructors and learn pieces that most students would need years to attempt. She felt her heart jump, though she tried to keep a straight face. She accepted softly, as she always did, but inside she felt something blooming. In the next room, a few instructors were waiting to speak with her. They asked how long she had been practicing pieces like the one she played at the showcase. She hesitated before answering. She did not want to sound like she was bragging. She simply said she had been practicing late at night for a long time, ever since she first fell in love with the piano. The instructors exchanged looks, surprised, but also impressed by her discipline. One of them suggested she consider entering a regional competition that was only a few months away. At first, she panicked at the thought of standing on a big stage with professionals watching her. But the teacher explained calmly that she did not have to win. They only wanted her to experience it. They believed she had something special, and they wanted her to share it beyond the academy. On her way home that day, she walked slower than usual. Her mind was full of questions. Could she really step into a world she had only admired from a distance? Could she handle the pressure? She had always been shy, and crowds made her uncomfortable. But then she remembered the feeling she had on stage the moment the music took over, and everything else faded away. That memory gave her strength. The following weeks were intense. The academy gave her a small practice room with a better instrument. She spent hours each day working on new techniques, studying difficult passages, and polishing her expression. The teachers guided her carefully, but they also gave her freedom to play in her own way. They realized her gift was not only in her skill, but in her sincerity. She played with emotion that could not be taught. Students often paused outside the room to listen. They whispered among themselves that she was different now, but the truth was she was the same. She was only finally being seen. Her family noticed changes too. She came home late, but with a peaceful smile. She talked a little more than before, sharing small parts of her day. They did not always understand the world of music, but they supported her quietly, knowing how much the piano meant to her. One evening, after a long practice session, she sat alone on the bench and let her hands rest on the keys. She thought about how everything had started. A simple invitation from her teachers, who had no idea what she was capable of. A moment of courage when she said yes. A performance she gave with honesty, not expecting anything in return. Those small steps had changed her entire path. She realized something important. Sometimes the world does not see your value until the moment you finally show it. And sometimes, even when people doubt you, you must trust your own quiet talent. When the day of the regional competition finally arrived, she felt nervous, but she also felt ready. She stepped onto the stage with calm eyes, knowing that every hour of practice, every silent night, every hidden dream had brought her to this moment. She sat at the piano, took a steady breath, and let her fingers begin. No one in the audience knew her story. No one knew how long she had carried her gift silently, but they would learn soon enough. And as the first note echoed through the hall, she felt the same stillness she had felt before, the stillness where doubt disappeared, and only music remained. Her journey was only beginning. And this time, she was not hiding anymore.